Recently, we've been talking about the importance of an audience. An audience is absolutely key for all of us, and I think sometimes we find it challenging to know what audience we want to get in front of. It's very easy to think that anybody and everybody could use our services. I mean, Chris has got an ability to massage everybody. So, and Marcus and has got an ability to photograph everybody, as Nick. And Andrew could produce websites for everybody. But we've talked recently about the importance of audience, of defining the audience, and really understanding the audience. Because I think the most frustrating thing I've always found in business is chasing around people who are not really interested or not ready. They're just not interested in what it is we have to offer. That is frustrating. And it can force us to be overselling. It can force us to be pressurizing people where the timing's not right, the interest is not there. And there's nothing more frustrating than that. But it's always an absolute pleasure to talk to somebody that is in a position and is interested in the solutions you have. And then all you've got to do is you've got to build that relationship. People are leaning in. You've got to make sure that they see an authority, that you know what you're talking about, that they trust you, that there's a rapport going on. It's far easier to do business like that. So getting in front of the right audience versus the wrong audience is the first thing. Now, there's two basic ways to get in front of an audience that I know of. It's what you do proactively, and that's what maybe you're on LinkedIn for, to try and get in front of audiences, or you go to networking events online and offline, or maybe you're on social media and you're interacting there. And there's another way to get in front of an audience. It's a way that I find very fascinating and I really enjoy, and that is where you get other people to tell other people how good you are so that they put you in front of their audience. And that, of course, is referral marketing, or making joint ventures and the like. And that in itself is very valuable. Now, in both of those cases, I suppose they're not that getting in front of those audiences, if you're doing it right, I suppose, are predictable. But there's one way that you can get in front of an audience, and that is, by the way, those other two things can take time. But there's one way you can get in front of exactly the right audience this week if you know what you're doing. And the question is, will you do it at the right price, and will you actually bother to do it? And that way is through advertising. Now, we've done that traditionally. People advertising Yellow Pages, people have advertised in newspapers. And of course, there's lots of competition on those. And the reason why newspapers are losing their clout is because they've got a wide audience and it's not very specific, and it's not very easy to determine how to get in front of exactly the right audience you have. But digital advertising is golden if you know what you do. And there's one particular person on here that knows what he's doing when it comes to getting in front of the right audiences. And I'd just like him to give a little bit of a background to why he's that expert. And then I'm going to hand it over to Ewan.
Thank you. Why am I that expert? I suppose I have been in marketing since 1996, when I graduated from university with a degree in marketing. For the last 15 years, since 2006, I've worked solely in digital marketing for companies ranging from charities to international technology companies, to my own company, to agencies based in advertising agencies based in the West Coast of the United States, the East Coast of the United States. I've run millions and millions and millions of pounds worth of advertising campaigns for companies big and small. So hopefully what I'm going to do today is just give you a little bit of an overview on what you can do. It's not an in-depth session. It's just an overview of the channels you can use. And they're based solely on my experience. Now, the one thing I always say about marketing is a subjective matter. There is no right 100% way of doing it. There is always a slight bit of opinion to it. So these are just my experiences based on what I've done and based on the size of businesses that the people on the call are running. So one thing to say is Paul has told me these slides are too long, so I appreciate them. Just use them as a visual guide to what I'm going to basically talk about. They are quite detailed. The aim of the detail really is so that when they're supplied to you afterwards, you've got something you can keep. As I say, this is not really a technical session that I run on how to do things. This is just an overview of the paid digital channels that I've used. And as I say, this is for paid advertising. So this is where you're paying, as Paul said, to get in front of an audience. So I see that there's a number of different channels that you can use. Some we all know, some perhaps we don't know. Some are basic, some are more advanced. So I've put in these ones. So we have search engine advertising, often known as paid search or Google ads. I will go into the depth that you can actually do more than just Google. Then there's what's called the Google Display Network and programmatic advertising. These two basically are networks that Google run and networks that other advertisers run that allow you to get in front of a much bigger audience through different types of websites. Think of it akin to advertising on newspapers. It's kind of that way in a digital world. Then we have social advertising, primarily LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. They're probably the ones that are used most for advertising these days. And then finally, website retargeting and what's called lookalike audiences. My personal love is search engine advertising. I think it's a very powerful tool. There's a lot of people who decry it and say it doesn't work. I would always stand up and argue against it if you know what you're doing. The reason often people think of Google is because Google has 85% of the search traffic in the UK currently. So it's 85% of all searches go through Google. You can run it through other search engines, and a lot of people ignore that completely. And funnily enough, whilst doing a research for this, I actually looked at something I haven't looked at for a long time. I looked at Microsoft. Now, Microsoft run Bing, and anyone who buys a computer in the UK will have Microsoft Edge put onto their computer as standard. That's what Microsoft do. And currently, Microsoft have 22% of desktop searches in the UK, which is quite a lot. Although a lot of searches now go through mobile, 22% is quite a lot. And if you would go to that link on ads.microsoft.com, at the moment, they're giving away, if you spend £20 on their advertising, they'll give you £100 worth of advertising on top, which is quite a big incentive. Now, if you combine that with the fact that Google will give you £75 if you do £25, that gives you quite a big chunk of advertising for not much spend. The way that I would do that is if I was to do, it's a bit of a pain having to run both through different sources, but you can just basically duplicate the ads from one to the other, which is something I can take someone through later on, or take through another session. Most ads on search, as we know, if you look on a search engine, they come up as sponsored ads or ad buy. Mostly are text ads, so you have a certain amount of text that you can pull people in. But there are other specialist formats you can use. So Google they have text ads, but they also have what they're called responsive ads and shopping ads. Now they're very specialist towards the particular product or service that you're offering. So mostly it's text ads. So when you think about paid search, I always think of it, it's basically a different way of doing it to traditional advertising. Because traditional advertising, you think about the product or service that you're offering and how you can reach that audience. With search, you have to put yourself in the mind of the audience. What are the audience doing to find you? What is their search? What are they typing into their search engine to search to you, which can often be quite different. And an example is the campaign that we're running at the moment for funeral marketing. The initial thought was, well, we're going to go for a target audience that we think are going to be looking for jobs because they're losing their jobs. So we looked at hospitality and events. But also I thought, what are people going to be searching for if they're looking for a product or service like ours? And I thought, well, they might be looking at how to become a funeral director. When we've actually run that campaign, the how to become a funeral director series of ads are outperforming the other ads by a ratio of about 6-1. So it's often you have to think a little bit outside the box. So you target by keywords. Now, primarily, I've put it in here. There are 3 types of keywords: broad match, phrase match, and exact match. If you think of broad match being exactly what it says, it's very, very broad and will bring all people in. Phrase match is slightly more targeted, and exact match is very, very targeted. This allows you to basically filter everyone that's coming in for you to target. So it's a powerful way of targeting. There is a way that I do it, and in another session I'll explain exactly how I do using targeting keywords to make sure you get the best return, which is basically you start with broad and then you go down. Yes, Paul.
Ewan, for those people that are not marketing people, how can you give us an example of a broad match, a phrase match, and an exact match?
Yeah. So if you
being very specific about.
Yeah. So in the context that I've just mentioned, in the context of funeral directors, if I just put in funeral director as a search word and had broad match, that would basically pick up any search involving a funeral director or something looked like a funeral, the words funeral director. So if it was like, I'm looking for a funeral, I'm unfortunately, I need to find I'm looking for a funeral venue, that would bring it up, because Google also uses semantics. So Google will also semantically look at what you're doing. A phrase match might be something like how to become a funeral director. And what Google will look for is searches that include that phrase within the search. An exact match on how to become a funeral director would only be people who would start searching that particular key phrase or the same intent as that particular key phrase. So if you think of it, what you have on broad is you have high volume, low intent, and Google puts a lot on intent. And intent is basically how related is my keyword to what I want someone to do. And as you move down from broad to phrase to exact, you move from higher volume to lower volume, from lower intent to higher intent. And it's getting the combination of those two that is basically the secret sauce of paid search marketing. If you're thinking about, even if you're just thinking about doing Google ads or paid advertising, or through Microsoft or through Bing, it's often quite interesting to go in and use their keyword tools just to see kind of what people might be searching. Because what you can do is, so you can put in what you think a keyword is, and they will suggest lots of others. And what they'll do is they'll also give you two things. They'll give you the volume of searches that there are per month in your particular region. And you can hone that down to global, UK, whatever. You can even go down to city if you want. They will also give you the competition. In other words, how aggressive is the bidding from other advertising for those particular keywords? And I always think that what you're trying to do is get the highest volume with the lowest competition, i.e. you're getting the most number of searches and the easiest way for you to be found. Now, we're lucky on funeral marketing because the keyword terms, funeral direction, anything to do with funeral direction, the volumes are low, but the competition is almost nothing. So hence our ad, for a very, very low cost, often appears on page 1 or possibly on page 2. And when you're doing Google as well, when you go in and do it, and again, I can do this on a very intense session, Google will often try and push you to pay more. They will say, we will expect you to pay £2.50 per click. And this is the number of clicks you can get. Now, experience tells me that's a load of rubbish. When you go in and do it, always set your cost per clicks very, very low to start with, because you do not need to be on page 1. You can quite happily survive on page 2 or page 3, because if people have high intent, if they're looking for your service, they will look for you beyond page 1. So for example, funeral director searches, they wanted us to pay £2.50 per click. Our average cost per click is 29p. And we're getting high value search traffic coming through to the website based on those low costs. So it doesn't have to be low cost. And I think this is why people fail. People fail at this because they go in and they just take Google at face value for what Google suggests. Now, obviously it's easy for me to say because I've got years of experience of knowing certain things that Google try and do. But what I can do is I can put together a list of things to think about when you're doing it, where Google will tell you one thing and actually you can get away with another. Other useful targeting for Google. So yes, keywords is the basic form of targeting, but you can also geographically target down to town, I think. city certainly, but town, you can do what's called day parting. So if you know, for instance, for something like Zoesa's service, where perhaps it's people who are in they're in their leisure time and they're not searching at work, and she knows that her searches are going to be between 5 and 7 p.m. in the evening, you can set it so that your ads only appear between 5 and 7 p.m. in the evening. And also there are some demographics you can do. So demographics being sex, age. I'm not sure you can do socioeconomic, but you can do sex and age, certainly. And there may be some others. And the way that the cost model for search is pay per click. So hence, what your aim is to get the most number of clicks at the lowest possible cost. And if you think about Google or any search engine, what they want to do is get you at the most number of clicks at the highest possible cost. So yes, Paul.
Ewan, it's when people think about pay per click, they think, that's what it's going to cost me for every click. But it is an auction, isn't it?
It's totally an auction. Yeah. So hence, you don't have to. Google will suggest, and as I say, if you think of the example I've used, Google have said, we suggest that you set your bidding, and that's what it does. You set your bidding levels at £2.50. Now, when you set up a Google campaign, they make it lovely and simple. You can go through on their tool and set up through their tool, and they'll automate it for you. But they will set your bidding at automated. And if your bidding is automated, it effectively means you've got no cost ceiling. But what you can do is you can quite happily say, I just want to test this. I want to see if this is going to work. So I'm going to put in a ceiling of X, so 30p. What you can also do, again, if you've got the mind to go in and play about, you can go in and play about and see how this works. But what you can also do is you can go in and play around with the figures. So you can go in and say, and it's an interesting thing to do, because to be fair to Google, they will show you the responses they expect. You can go in and say, so if I set what would happen if I set my bid ceiling at 25p a click? And it'll tell you what response to expect, what your click-through rate will be, the number of impressions, the impressions stay the same, the number of clicks you expect to get, the page in which you appear. You can then play and say, what's it, 50p, what is it, £1? And you'll often find there will be a sweet spot, and the sweet spot will be far away from what Google says. And when I say sweet spot, it'll be much lower. But again, I can demonstrate this in the session. This is just an overview, but the basic premise is don't believe everything that Google says. And certainly when you're running a campaign, Google will say to you, this is how I suggest you optimize. And they may suggest that you move to dynamic ads, or that you move to showing ads in equal rotation. Again, not necessarily have to listen to what Google says. A classic example was when we were running our campaign, Google wanted me to auto-rotate the ads. I did that, and we saw our response go down because of it. So we turned it back up, and then they went back up again. But again, that's because of knowledge. So does anyone have any questions, or has that got too technical?
Ewan, are there certain industries or products that are either better aligned and work more effectively on Google ads than others? And conversely, other industries that just don't ever deliver on a Google AdWords campaign?
Well, I'll be honest with you. My experience with Google ads has been business to business. So I don't have much business to consumer experience in it. But I would always say, but I know that Kelly does, I would always say that it can be used for anything. It's just the model that you use to how to make it work financially will be very, very different. So if you're selling widgets at £1 each, your model will be very, very different to if you're selling funeral director costs at X thousands per month, or X per product. And all you need to do is work the mathematics out. So I would say, as long as you get the basics of knowing your target audience, knowing what they're searching, knowing the other bits and bobs that you want to go in, and knowing your bidding strategy, and working out what your cost per acquisition is, you can make it work on anything. It's just the numbers work. And as I say, I know Kelly used to work for a very big insurance company, and they knew down to they knew to the penny how much they could afford to spend per click on particular keywords to be able to make their product work. And their product actually was a lower cost product. I think it was about 150 quid. So I would say you can use it for everything. It's just the model changes, just if that makes sense, Nick.
Yeah.
So then linked.
Actually,
sorry.
Sorry, I've just got one supplementary question. If I think about myself and how I use Google, I tend to ignore the ads because I know they're ads, and I prefer to go for businesses that have achieved their ranking organically because I trust them more inherently, because I think they've got there somehow by doing something good. Is that common, or I mean, how do people behave when they're looking at Google AdWords campaigns? Do they tend to trust the ad? I guess they do, otherwise the campaign wouldn't work.
And yes, a lot of people do that. I think it's if your intent is high and you're looking for something and you're of that particular mind, that people will do ads. But it comes to an interesting point. One of the use cases I've always used page search for is actually supporting organic search, especially if your website's new and it's still in what's known as the Google sandpit. Remember, there are millions and millions of searches and there are millions and millions of people. So there will be groups that will never click on an ad, and there will be groups who see it as a nefarious way of getting in front of people. But equally, if someone can't find something through organic search, they will click on ads, which is why it works. I mean, and the figures are there. So it's a difficult one. I think it comes down to personal choice. I personally, because I know it, I don't see any different.
Is it more to do with the headline and how that's presented? Because you might argue that the people are more likely to be paying for ads and top of that search and names you trust. And if you trust them, you say, yes, I remember they do that. So you click there. Whereas if you're curious and you've got a really good headline or a good ad lower down, let's face it, people are going to scan that page. Don't they say that the majority of clicks will be at the upper end of the page?
That's what they say. But again, it all comes down to cross-model. So yes, the majority of, there's the whole thing of looking in, you want to be at the top because you want to be for the fold. You want to be on page one, which is why everyone pays to be on page one. With Google paid advertising, and I would say it's probably a bit, it's a bit controversial to say it. You don't need to be on page one. Google advertising. I always think of it. Google and I've said this before. Google advertising. If you think of having a piece of wood or a board that's in something that's in balance, Google advertising is about what balance you want to achieve, and that balance is achieved by a combination of cost, time, and various other things. And often that balance can be off center. In other words, it doesn't have to be page one. It doesn't have to be there. It comes down to your financial model. But I would also say, Paul, you're exactly right. The basic premises of any advertising do apply. Good headline, good product, good offer, and good experience. Good experience is key. And by that, I mean that when someone leaves Google to come to your whatever you've got, they've got to have a good experience. So some tips.
I was going to say, I've heard so many web people say, I promise I'll get you on page one of Google. And I've always poo-hooed that because I've always thought, well, everybody can't be on page one of Google, but it depends on what the search terms are. It depends how much somebody's prepared to pay. So if you've got a lot of people seeing you on page one and you can't handle that response, you wasted your money. So I suppose that is a balance as well.
Yeah. And I would almost say it's irrelevant. Being on page one is totally irrelevant. Now, remember there are two types. I'm talking about paid, and then you've got organic. Organic is unpaid. It's where you're applying best practices to your website to appear as high as you can. Yes, absolutely. You want to be as high as you can. There's no doubt about that. On paid search, it's different, and it all comes down to maths. So some tips and use cases. The one thing with paid search, and this is where everybody goes wrong, the people who will sit there and say it doesn't work, I guarantee this is where it goes wrong. They don't set clear budget limits. For funeral marketing, we are spending £5 a day. It's tiny. I think we're averaging, we talked on Saturday, we're averaging about 160 quid a month. And how many leads? We've probably got 30 leads or 20 leads in the pipeline, of which 5 or 6 are good leads that we are that we have far down the pipeline. You set clear budget limits on day limits, and you can also set overall limits that you don't want to go above a certain amount. Now, what Google will do is Google will immediately slap a £200 kind of ceiling on you so that you can see it. When you see those budget limits, they may go up and down in terms of, they may go slightly over your daily budget limit, but effectively they will stick to those limits. And that means that you can control the maths. And it's all about controlling the maths. When building, think not only about your offer, but also what people might be searching for. And this is where you think of it slightly differently. We think about our products and services in terms of us. I am a photographer. I am this. This is what I'm going to offer. But you've got to think about how people are going to find you and what their intent is to find you. Use your organic search stats to inform your keyword strategy. You have, if you've got a website, whatever it's built with, you will have some statistics that show how people are coming to your website and the search terms that they are using. Use those stats. You can use other stats. You can use other tools like SEMrush. Now you can use SEMrush free, and I know Kelly put it in the chat last week to help inform you even further. But they will give you an idea of how people are finding you currently. Another reason why people fail is they apply a one-size-fits-all to search. They'll just put up one ad and they'll just spend on it. Don't do that. Break down ads into clear groups. So we have an ad that's very clearly for events and hospitality. That the copy speaks to people who unfortunately are in a situation where they may be losing their jobs in events and hospitality. We have one that's very specific to funeral directors. Are you looking to be a funeral director? We have, and what you do is then you have the ad copy and you have the keywords. The keywords are very selective towards those ad groups. So I always think of digital marketing is about, the keyword with any digital marketing is relevance. Be relevant. Be as relevant as you possibly can. The keywords are very relevant to those groups. That will allow you to see. Otherwise, if you think about it, if you've just got one group, one ad, one set of keywords, you don't really know what's going on. There may be nuances in there, but you can't understand them. If you have different groups, different ads, you can understand the nuances of what's going on. And you might then be able to say, okay, well, I know X works. I can take away Y and I just can stop doing it. Write many variations of your ads. Don't just have one. Write many. Write 10. Write 15. Write as many as you want, because what you can then say to Google is, Google, serve up, learn first, Google, and then after that, serve up the best performing ones. And that's what Google will do. And that's just any form of marketing, especially digital marketing. Testing is always good. So it's just testing and learning, testing and learning. Use the analytics. So you can use a combination of Google Analytics, and you can use also Google Ads to understand search behavior to modify your keywords. The other thing about search, and probably why people aren't successful, is they set and forget. With search, you can't set and forget, not unless you happen to get it right first time. The idea of search is this constantly evolving topic. You basically, you set up, you say, this is what I think is going to cause the best result. And then you look and you go, actually, these keywords are working. These keywords aren't working. Because what you will find is whatever keyword set you have, I can guarantee the 80-20 rule will apply. 20% of your keywords will generate 80% of your traffic. You want to focus on those 20%. And as I said here, add, remove, and long tail. Now, long tail, all long tail means is, so if I've got funeral director as a search term and I want to long tail, all long tail means is expanding on that search term. Expanding on that search term might be, I want to become a funeral director. So I've expanded from funeral director to I want to become a funeral director. Why do I do that? Two reasons. One, you're making your search term more relevant to what your offer is. Two, the longer a search term or the more complex a search term, the lower the cost will be. So you're helping your maths. You're driving down your cost. You're increasing your relevancy. Hence, you're improving your marketing. The next point is to say, beware of what Google tells you to optimize. Google will do what Google wants to do to make Google more profitable. Sounds terrible, but it's true. You don't necessarily have to do what Google says. and sometimes actually doing the opposite of what Google says is not a bad thing. And my closing thing, but despite what a lot of people say, paid search can be a powerful marketing tool when done correctly. It can be used to increase sales. It can be used for brand awareness. And your point, Paul, when you often see big brands occupying page one of the search ads, that's a brand awareness as much as anything. They're saying we're a big brand, we must be here. Their expectation is to be there, even if they appear at page one on organic search. And thirdly, as an interesting one, is to support organic search. Now, I can be honest with you, I have no proof of this, but Kelly and I have been running a campaign recently, and we have a suspicion that because we've been running paid ads, we think that actually Google has ranked our site quicker than normal. I can't prove it, and probably a lot of people would say that's a load of rubbish. But we put a site up in December, which would usually take 3 to 6 months to rank, and it ranked within 2 months for certain terms. So I've always used it to support organic search. Often when new companies start, or when we've got new products or services coming out, and I think it's possibly a real powerful thing. But as I say, I can't guarantee it, but it's just a sense that we both have that actually. It's a good thing to do because you just appear where you want to appear. But I think also there may be something going on that helps you rank quicker. Does anyone have any questions on that? Has anyone had a bad experience with search?
A question, Ewan.
Yes.
So, a minute, let me just...
Ewan, do you want to unshare your screen?
Hang on. Yeah. Hang on. Stop share. Hang on. It's now hiding my... Sorry, I'm having a Zoom issue here.
It's right.
Okay.
Right.
There we go.
Oh, here we go.
Yes.
Yeah, so my question, I'm sure you're aware of this. I'm certainly aware of it. There's a lot of stuff at the moment going on about... at the moment, we've got a blanket cookie thing, because obviously analytics works a lot off of cookies. You know what I'm going to ask. And at the moment, there's a big push, and certainly by the UK government, where they're talking about having necessary cookies to run the website, and then cookies that cover stuff like analytics. And people have to basically, instead of just going, yeah, whatever, click on set of cookies, it's now getting very specific, where people are actually made to think about, oh, I don't want advertising, and they click it off, and that's going to obviously have a big impact. If that really that sort of goes through as the way we've got to do it, and I know there's stuff on the Information Commissioner's Office website at the moment. So, what's your thoughts on that really, and how that's going to impact looking at analytics and being able to sort of tailor stuff?
Potentially, it's massive. There will always be a workaround, but it may well be that the where we come to is an imperfect version of where we are now, from an advertiser's point of view, not from an individual's point of view.
Yeah.
Because it depends how that has to be presented. Marketing has always been a case of you have to make marketing as frictionless as possible. As soon as you start putting friction into marketing struggles, because marketing is invasive in its own way, and you add in what Apple are doing with some of the Apple Facebook stuff, it is going to become more difficult, and analytics probably will become more difficult. You could argue that analytics is way too intrusive as it is at the moment. The fact that we can understand what we can stand, I think all these things will take time, and we'll just have to live with what happens. Marcus.
Yeah, thanks, Ewan. That was really interesting, that presentation. And I do use Google Ads. I've been doing it for about 2 years. I've got 3 ads running. And it's, I mean, when I first, in the last year, it's been quiet with them. But initially, before COVID, I was getting about half my business from them. So they definitely have got value to them. And, Google are quite helpful in setting them up with you. They do spend quite a bit of time, but you're right, they do try and make you spend a lot of money, which you don't need to do.
Are you actively looking at them and actively playing around with the figures and playing around to get that balance. That's what you need to do. And you'll know, I would imagine by now, you kind of, you know the maths involved. You know what you're spending to get what you get. That's all you want to get to.
Yeah, I've got 3 types of ad. I've got 2 local ones, which are basically 20-mile radius, one for teaching and one for headshots and branding. And then I've got a third one, of course, for my men's personal branding, which is half of the UK. And that one is an incredibly low cost per click, as you would imagine. I mean, it's been going for about 6 months, so I've never had any inquiries from it, but I just use it as a way of building up the brand, really. Like you were saying, brand building. And I was going to ask, I was going to say what Nick said about, I do wonder, though, if people do avoid clicking on the ads, because I know, ironically, I do as well. I don't click on them, other people's, but there you go. But what I was going to say, though, is also worth adding to the mix is Google My Business, which is free, of course. And that really helps as well in your SEO and getting business and keeping it local.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of must do's of digital marketing currently, for any business, Google My Business is a must do.
Yes,
because it does a number of things. One, it will help serve your search, your organic search better.
Yep.
Secondly, and Rod will attest to this, the reviews that you put up will also help your search, but also they will make your business appear to be the business that you want it to be, that it's trustworthy and et cetera, et cetera. But also it's free. Why wouldn't you do it?
That's right.
Rod, sorry.
Yeah, all I was going to say was in answer to Marcus's question in relation to people, do they click on, the first thing that comes up, or do they click on, someone more established and keep looking down? In my experience, it just depends on the person that's looking. And sometimes I get calls from people that have no relation to me at all, and I've got no relation to the funeral they're doing, but they just click on the first thing, and I pick up the phone. I genuinely answer the question for them, even though I'm not doing the funeral. But it's just easier that way than trying to put them on to whoever it is they were looking for, because I don't know who they're looking for, really. They have to look back and see who they were looking for. But generally, what I find is that if you put into, like for me, I just put into my Google on my phone, funeral. As soon as I put the word funeral in, funeral director comes up near me. And then you get a listing of who the funeral directors are that are near you that might serve your particular individual need. Now, obviously, the joy for me is that straight away, I'm right at the top because I advertise. And then as I go down the search, I'm not just there once, twice, 3 times. I'm there lots of times. I'm there on the map. I'm there. And, so if you like that familiarity, if someone not knowing a funeral director, seeing that many links, if you like, will give them a bit more confidence. And then if they're really keen, they'll look at the reviews and they'll go from there. But most people, when I'm speaking to someone originally, if they're coming down the phone between 9 and 5, they normally speak to the ladies that answer my phone. They're very good and will screen out anybody that has of no point me speaking to them. And then, so when I do speak to someone that's come off of Google, I know they come off of Google. The girls have already sorted it out. They tell me who's who. And then we can get straight into a meaningful conversation and deal with their individual needs and requirements,
Rod, you said that to me on a few occasions where you've had a sort of an upsurge of people away off your area that are inquiring. Ewen, is that because he's not set a geographic boundary to the ads?
Oh, I have. I've set a geographic boundary.
Oh, you have. All right.
Probably.
But the other thing also is, remember, there are ways of getting around geographic boundaries. If you're working on a VPN, a virtual private network, Google won't be able to see that. So hence the reason for funeral marketing, we're getting people from Italy, India, and everything else, because they're obviously working on virtual private networks, VPNs. Yeah.
Right. I think Nick had a question, then Martin.
Yeah, actually, it kind of ties into what Rod just replied to as well. I think, is it important, I guess, that you pre-filter people in as much as you can? Because what you don't want is time wasters, do you? You're paying for them if they click, and
That's
B,
right.
you're picking the phone up and having a conversation, and that's a distraction. So the more focused you can be, I guess, the better.
Yeah, and you can do a number of things for that, and it's the last slide, and one of the most important things I would always say is before you do any advertising, you can front load that, so you can front load that pre-qualification by the search terms that you use. The other way to do it is with the experience they get when they arrive to your site. So again, our example is when people click on an ad, that qualification is basically a video of Paul saying, this is not a job. If you are interested in being a funeral director, and if you're interested in launching a business to be a funeral director, contact us. Instantly, the people who are thinking they want a quick job to be a funeral director are thinking, well, that's not for me. That's fine. I'm quite happy for you to qualify yourself out, because I don't want Paul to be spending his time on having a conversation with someone who's just not interested.
So on that basis, Ewan, do you think it's better to send people to a landing page rather than to your homepage on your website? Or
never send someone to your homepage.
Yeah.
Always think of relevance. Think of how can I be more relevant? And the only way you can be more relevant is to be single-minded in the landing that you're sending them to. So that Chris has just designed one. So ours is very, very, our website talks about the funeral industry and how it's changing and how to be digital. The landing page simply says, are you looking to set up your own funeral business? And that's all it does, so that person knows when they're coming that there's a single-minded intent.
Yeah.
And also within that page, set yourself different data points. And by that, I mean, don't just say, I want to sell stuff. Say, right, what am I trying to do? My aims are threefold. I want people to come to my website. That's my first data point. I want people to view my video. That's my second data point. And then I want people to submit a form to get more information or to speak to Paul. What you can do within Google then is you can set those 3 data points up. So you can say, I can understand how many people hit data point 1, then how many people go from data point 1 to data point 2, then from data point 2 to data point 3. And it all sounds very technical. It's not really. All you're saying is this, all you're basically asking your question is the experience I'm serving to them the best it can be for me and for them? So I can see, okay, I know that X people. So also what you can say is, okay, there's a lot of people falling off when they see the video and I'm not getting the right sort of people through. So do we need to re-record the video? Or there's a lot of people who are coming to the site, but actually going no further. Is there something I need to do to change it? So that you're constantly asking yourself the question, is this as good as it possibly can be? And that's the way you make it work. It's hard work, and it's when I started running search in 2006, it was easy. You just put an ad up and that was it. Hey, presto. Hey, you got lots of stuff coming through because very few people were doing it. Now you have to work very, very hard to do it. And obviously Marcus is working hard and he understands what works for him.
But we do expect people to drop off from the video fairly soon, because fairly early on, I actually say it twice, this is not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's not for anybody that's looking for a job. And so at that point, they're bound to drop off. The people that get to the end, so we can analyse the times people have spent on the video. And what I would be looking for is that the people that have spent 100% should match the number of inquiries or close to that. Because if you watch 100% and the video has been persuasive enough, that should match the number of people that then fill in the form.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, and that's understanding good drop-off and bad drop-off.
Yeah. So that is that qualification, Nick.
Yeah. I think
and also a form, even if you don't have a video, a form can also get rid of the people that are not serious, because the more you ask for information on a form, people will drop. If you just got an email address, somebody will put something in. Somebody's got a name and an email address, but then you've got a phone number. And then you're asking for more information. Only the serious are going to fill out all the information. Martin, you had a question.
Yeah, hi, Ewan. Thanks for that. It's really interesting. My question was really, if presuming you get the sweet spot and you get all your search terms correct, is there a sort of average payback? Like if you spend £1 is there an average kind of, oh, then you're going to make £5, like a, you know, like stocks or something, you know?
No, it's very much dependent. As I say, it's very much dependent on the use case, and it's very much dependent on the product that you're doing. And the way to understand, it's one of those things. It's coming at it from both ends. You know how much an average customer is worth. You know if I have a customer, my average customer is going to be X for me. So you know that point. The other point is, how much am I going to spend? And the idea is to bring those two together. And it's very much dependent on your business or your service. Because as I say, if you're selling a widget for £2, you can't, you probably can't afford to spend X. So your return on investment might be 1.2. In funeral marketing, if we sell one product, our return on investment is going to be 20X, and it's going to be 100X or 50X. So it can be 10, but you can have in your mind, what am I, I know if a customer's worth £50. So I know my ceiling has to be £50. It can't be any higher than that because I was going to lose money. So you can start from there and work it backwards. But because there are so many different factors that can affect it, you've got external factors, you've got competition, you've got, as Andrew said, you've potentially got changes in legislation. There are so many things that can affect it that it's difficult to give that. And anyone who says I can give you a return of 5X, they don't know what they're talking about, because if they're telling you without understanding your business. Now, fair enough, some people who've worked with photographers might say, in my experience, I can return 3 times the investment because they've got that experience. But I don't think there's a one size fits all. There is another interesting point to what we've just been talking about. Whatever advertising you're doing, if you're going to design a landing page and you're going to design a really good landing page, use it for all of your response if you're trying to sell the same thing, because you can understand. That's great, because you can understand how a different channel works on a different channel, and you might find that those maths are slightly different from social media to paid search to retargeting to whatever it is. So you can do the work, and it's not a lot of work to do each one. You can do one piece of work, as in build a really great landing page, and then use it as a piece for everything to come into. Yeah,
Ewen, some people are I think some people are risk averse. I don't like gambling. I've been to Las Vegas, I think 3 times, maybe 4, and I think I've only once was I persuaded to put $20 aside to have the fun of losing it. So I'm risk averse, but I suppose there's no guarantee. In answer to Martin, there is no guarantee of anything. But the one thing you can do is at least measure. I think that's the key, I would say, in any marketing, is at least you can measure whether something has worked. Otherwise, it's a gamble. Now, I wanted to ask Marcus, you set yourself a budget. How did you arrive at that budget?
Well, I've got different budgets depending on my campaign that I'm running. But basically, it's a little bit trial and error. And you do spend, at first, I did spend quite a bit of money and then gradually narrowed it down. But you do it by just setting your limits. As Ewen said, you can decide if you want to spend £3 a day, £10 a day, or whatever. So that's how you decide. And you can decide how many people you're going to be in touch with by your geographical area or your demographic. For example, on my male personal branding advert, only men can click on it, will see it on their advertising, on their Google. Women won't see it.
So really, knowing what you know now, you'd have probably done it the reverse way around. You'd have started with a low budget to test and learn, and then move and then scale it up.
That's correct. But as Ewen said, the Google bot people do phone you up, and they do. At first, it seems incredibly complicated, and they're going through. They'll spend about an hour and a half with you setting your campaign up, and you think, what the hell are they doing? But then you gradually understand what they're doing, and then you can, like Ewen says, fine tune it. You can also you can change your keywords easily on your phone or on your computer. You can see which keyboards people are clicking on, or negative keywords is a really good way of doing it as well, as I'm sure Ewen knows.
Yeah, I mean, I would. You've done exactly right. The way I always do it is I start off I start off with as low a cost as I can. And I do that thing where I talked about, you play around with the keyword tool and you'll find it's fascinating. Well, if you're so interested in things, it's fascinating because if you play around with the cost per click, you will find a sweet spot. And it will be, I was playing around with one for a client last year and I was playing somewhere between 25p and 50p, at 75p. And actually the sweet spot was at 38p. 38p gave me the best combination of click-through rate, page, and everything else. So you're starting off, and as you say, if you're setting £5 a day, you're not going to get enough traffic to be able to statistically be significant, but you'll get enough to get an idea. And the other thing I do, and I don't know if you did it, I always start off with broader keywords. I want to know what's happening. I want to learn any search program, any paid search program. The first 2 weeks is you've got to kind of say, I'm going to kind of write a budget off for the first couple of weeks to learn what's going on and optimize. And and I'm sure you've done it. And in that time, on the new Google Ads interface, you go through and there's a little bell icon, and that's where they say have a look at how you can improve your campaign. The really good thing on there is it'll give you keyword suggestions. So they will automatically suggest, they will help you do your keyword job for you because they will look at the search terms that have come through and help you do that. Marcus, as once you kind of have fiddled out how to do it, a couple of minutes a day or 10 minutes a week can help you sort it out.
Ewan, do you know what the average spend on Google is in the UK for a company?
No, but I imagine it's high.
I believe it's 40 million a year.
Yeah.
Now you can see why Google are one of the richest companies in the world. And when they started off, we all said, how are they going to make money out of this?
One company I worked for used to spend $350,000 a month.
Yeah. It's, massive amounts of money.
But you don't have to. We're spending 170 quid a month and we can make it work. It all depends what market you're operating in. I mean, you look at some of the cost per clicks that I was dealing with, you could pay £50 for a click. Yeah. Now, there's something in the industry called clickbait, which is where, they will employ people to go and click on your ads just to blow your budget.
I know.
50 quid per click just for someone sitting there clicking is eye-watering. In fact, I ran a campaign once and we actually got Google to pay us back a significant amount of money because we managed to prove that someone had been doing that.
Martin, you've got your hand up.
Another question was, like with any marketing, you need time. I wondered if you'd say, well, you need to pay for a month and then you might start seeing results. I wondered if there was any standard for that.
I always whatever campaign I'm doing, I would always say think about running for 4 to 6 weeks, with the first 2 weeks being a learning curve. After that, you should have an idea of the maths involved and whether you can make it work. And to a certain extent, unfortunately, like any marketer, you kind of need to sort of set in the back of your mind. I will always say to a client, set in the back of your mind that I can't tell you where this is going to work. I can tell you that I can apply the best possible methods and things that I know to it. But effectively, you kind of have to write that money off in your head because then it's easier, because then you're not going to have a difficult conversation where you're saying, but you said it was going to do X. I can't tell you that. And anyone who can tell you that, I'm sorry, no one has got a crystal ball that clear. But if you say 4 to 6 weeks, and if you say 4 to 6 weeks at £5 a day, well, funeral marketing, that's about let's say it's 250 quid. Well, if I went to Google first time, that 200, if I went only to Google first time and 250 quid, we'll knock 75 quid off that because they're going to give me 75 quid free. So that's 175. And if I split my budget between Microsoft and Google, well, between the two of them, I can get 175 quid. So you could, if cost, if you really wanted to, you could say, right, well, for 150 quid, I can get 6 weeks, really good campaign. and I can understand at least whether I think I can make it work or not work.
I think you and I don't know if this helps, Martin. I know when we set out to do this, and I defer to Ewan's expertise, I have to say, I thought the biggest response would be from people from the event industry, because that in the press was on the hospitality business. Anybody that's been involved in a people business like hospitality or running events can run a funeral. And if you're a people person, i.e. in hospitality, you can run a funeral. So I thought they'd be the obvious people to go for. And yet the stats don't indicate that. So I think it's, what do you learn? The thing that I've taken away from our campaign has been what I've learned from it, because what I think people should do is not what people think they should do. And I think that's important. It's seeing what problems they have, what they're interested in, and therefore they're at that stage getting in front of everybody.
Yeah.
And a couple of things that have come out. The majority of people that have rung, that have inquired, are women. And the majority of people, and we do have 5 or 6 people, as we say, looking to, it's all a matter of timing. I mean, we're selling a £10,000 product at the moment. So the costs are minimal. But rather than think about that, what we've realized that an awful lot of people, when I've got down to the conversation, they want to know how to get started. They don't necessarily right now have the funds to do what we know they need to do to be successful, but they still want that information. So one of the discussions, and this is an interesting one for everybody here that's doing anything, the interesting discussion is, although we set out to sell businesses, what everything's taught us is that people are interested in maybe more information, maybe a course, maybe a network. And so I'm midway through devising a funeral marketing course, which will have 2 parts. One will be everything you need to know to get started, and also everything you need to know to market that business. They could be 2 separate courses. Now, Manny was one of the people that came on the initial inquiry. Now, I know from a discussion with Manny, he's already paid for a course elsewhere. I'm not saying we would compete with that, but these people, so in other words, we're thinking, well, actually, maybe these other services we could offer that not only could be a revenue stream, not only can serve, but also could pay for the advertising. Because if you could get something that was delivered in a lower cost area, and if we're helping somebody with a course and they found that course to be really valuable, and we found the marketing, because we've also found some people that know all about, we're talking to several funeral directors that have been funeral directors for 15 to 12 years, but they want to go out on their own. So they don't need the training. What they need is the marketing skill. And if we're helping them with a mini course on marketing a funeral business, who they're likely to come to do that marketing? Ewan.
And that's absolutely, and that's an interesting side benefit that I've not seen on search beforehand, is actually helping to inform your product. But it's another interesting about search. So when we do that, when we launch these new products, I will have to launch a different search campaign, because the one I'm using, the maths will be different. If I'm selling something for 10 grand, the maths to selling a course for 97 quid or whatever it is very different. And I then have to think, probably I'm going to use some similar search terms, but I'm going to have to think again, put myself in the mind of someone like Manny or someone else who's looking at it. And I'm going to have to think differently. And I'm going to have to build a different landing page experience, because it's going to be a different experience. Because again, I still want to be able to learn exactly the same way.
And that's absolutely right, because you're talking for somebody that's searching for something different. But on the other hand, when I'm talking to people and knowing that the majority of people, we must have had about 60 people come through telephone conversations. I know that in probably a third of those, I've been able to say, well, of course, the alternative, given your circumstances, is that we do have details of a course. I can send them a link. And can you see where that can go? So that could be in Marcus's case, for instance, in what he's doing, it could very well be that the way through on the styling for men, photography, branding for men of style, men with personality, a teasing way through could be a lower cost item. And if that lower cost item only pays for the cost of the advertising, then you're advertising for nothing. And you can carry on doing, you can even spend more. Is that a good point?
The other thing that's quite interesting, and something for Marcus to consider or not, is the interesting stat that Paul's just put out about this. It's a really interesting campaign. It's the most interesting campaign, ironically. Out of all the millions I've spent, this one little campaign has caused much more interest than any others I've caused because of what I've seen. And the interesting thing is I've got no demographic targeting based on this campaign. There's nothing apart from geography. And it's interesting that I would say 85 to 90% of the people coming through are women, which if you'd have said that to me beforehand, I'd have said, I wouldn't have thought that would happen. Not through any sexist reasons, but why, if we got 50% of the country is men and female, there's something about this that seems to be attracting women without actually intentionally doing that. The landing page isn't designed for women. It's unless people fancy Paul on the video and think he's good to watch. So you can often learn, and the one thing I say about search is it will often tell you something you don't expect to find.
But what that would say to me, Ewen, is that maybe some content, blogs, etc., as to why women are best suited to be funeral directors. Why there's is the time right for women to take over the funeral business? All of that could help content, couldn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So exactly. So we've benefited not only from inquiries, but from a business that's been launched in January. Started marketing in January. We've learned so much in 2 months for effectively 500 quid spend. We've learned how to possibly change our products and introduce new products. We've learned a lot about our audience and continue to learn about our audience. So when people look at it, if you're offering the right type of product, you can often use it as a learning experience as well as simply a revenue. Now, revenue is obviously important, but if you kind of think about the things outside of that, then you might just find, and as I say, and to Paul's point about the expectation of how you target, thinking that you should target one group and actually target another. That's because you have to think of it frontward. I think of it as forwards and backwards. Forwards being this is what I'm offering, but backwards is what are people going to be looking for, and what are people going to be typing in that they might find me interesting. Now, in hindsight, you would say how to become a funeral director is bloody obvious because that's what we're offering, but you have to think in that way. So to Marcus's, it might be how can I prove my personal image? That might be something that someone might say, and you might think, well, okay, how do I explore that? And then you can use the keyword term to explore those themes of personal image or whatever it is to develop from the person's mind. And ideally, what you want to do is develop thoughts for people who potentially aren't in your customer audience. How can I think of people who maybe I'm wrong with my customer audience. Maybe they are slightly different. And how can I understand if I can bring a slightly different customer through?
Rod.
This works better your personal hand. Forget the other hand. Don't work at all. Now, I had an interesting email this morning because, of course, as you all probably know from the news, that they're now expanding the numbers of people that can come to a funeral, apparently from the 17th of May. So we'll get to know something this week, and each individual crematorium or church will have different numbers that they can seat. So the Nub News, which is an online newspaper that seems to be going all over the country. I don't know if there's a Nub News in Bath or what, but there is certainly one in Wells, and there's certainly one in other smaller towns near Wells. But so he asked me for a comment on that. So I've given him a comment on that. I've given him a little note about how important that will be for families to enable them to you know, think about the past, the present, and also moving on into the future, you know. But that's another way of, again, you're there. You've got to be the go-to. You know, I know this isn't necessarily about Google, but Google's putting you there, and lots of other different platforms are putting you there. You've got to be that go-to. Let the rest be a bit shy and retiring, but you mustn't be, and you can't be, because you want to be seen. You've got to be the go-to. Who do they think of when they think of funerals? Well, if they didn't think of Wells Funeral Service, I'd be shocked.
That's because you put yourself about and you're very visible in the community. There's a point here, because there's probably people on this call and probably people seeing the recording still are risk averse and maybe don't want to. They don't feel they know enough. They're too nervous of doing some advertising. But you mentioned one thing about what people are searching for, the keyword tool. To me, I think that has got so much, that should be in everybody's, everybody should be using that, because when you search for that, it tells you what people are wanting to know more about. It might tell you the problems that they're having. I think there's another thing called Quora as well. Do you, I mean...
This doesn't work like that, actually, does it?
They're breaching the contract. Yeah.
All right, no, I thought Nick was saying something there, but that keyword search, can it be used elsewhere for those of us that don't want to do any advertising?
Yeah, you can. I've used it for lots of different things. I've used it when I'm researching presentations. I've used it when I'm doing branding. I've used it when I've done a branding thing. I use it for everything. It's such a powerful tool because it shows, it's a bellwether. It shows the interest of people in your product or your service or your area, because it's like, where else can you get live data about what people think about something or what people are searching on? And it's free, you know.
Do you want to explain what that does and where people can find it?
Well, I mean, if there's the Google one, which you can find via Google, the Google Ads website, and all you have to do is go in with I think you just log in. If you've got a Google Analytics account, which most people will have for their website, or you have a Gmail account, you can go. You have to have a Gmail account. You can go in and do that, and you can find the keyword tool in there. And it's really simple. You just literally type in a word and it will come up with suggestions of words like it and tell you what the search terms and the competition are. And then what Kelly does, I don't think she's got it on here, but I've got a download, and we just download all the data. We just literally download the data, and it tells us what, let me see, I'll send an example out. I can send an example out. It's not commercial. I can send an example out, the sort of data that you can see, and it just tells how many search terms, what are the competition. So, and you can use it for your SEO. You know, we use it for organic search. So when we're designing a website, and I'm sure Andrew knows this, this is, you know, you download it, you look at it, because then you think, what do I want to focus my organic, you know, what do I want to focus my SEO on? What are the key search terms that I want to have for my SEO? Well, you use the Google search, the search tool, or you know, the proprietary ones that you can also find online as well, but they all plug into the same thing. It's a massively useful tool.
A lot of those, just to say, a lot of those proprietary ones like SEMrush, as Ewen's mentioned, Uber Suggest, which is Neil Patel's thing, all those things, you can usually, if you're risk averse, which also you can set up one website for free, and you can get used to the tool and sort of compare and contrast, and then decide, oh, actually this is really good. You know, I think I'll pay for this, and then you can do more with it. So the other one as well is if you're running a website, is Google Search Console. That's an interesting one as well, because that shows you what terms people are using, and a whole host of other things. And you can also connect Google Search Console with Google Analytics, and then you get a lot more value out of those things as well. So yeah, it's a big old topic, isn't it?
I think the key to all of this, because on Marketing Crew we're talking about different ways and finding having a strategy and finding a way that you're going to get in front of the audience, you're going to start to engage with them, you're going to produce a sale, you're going to retain that customer, and how you're going to get introductions. So there's many ways in which you set about your business. And there's many ways that we've got a limited amount of budget. So we're going to decide how we're going to use that. But let's remember, the first thing we've got to do is to think, how much is that client going to be worth? Short term, long term. Is it a one-off purchase? That's short term. Is it a repeat purchase? Even if it's an annual one, how long are we going to keep them for? We need to get an idea of what that will be worth. Especially even referral partners, how much is a particular referral partner worth? How much could you be worth to them? How would you repay that, etc.? So it's knowing what a client is worth, and then knowing and deciding, even if it's in the air, how much am I prepared to pay to get that client sooner or later? Because it will cost, even if you say I'm not going to spend anything. And I've reached out to people about networking events. As well, if you think I'm going to pay for it, then I'm mistaken. I'm not going to pay for it. You always pay for it. You're going to pay for it in the time it takes you to get in front of those clients and win that business. You're going to pay for it. You're going to pay for it in time. And all those times you're not in front of people, you're not growing your business, you're having to pay out for your cost of living and your overhead, etc. So there's always a cost. The rest is in trust that you are in good hands and you find something that works that you're able to measure. And again, that's why marketing has to be analytical. It has to be a measurement, you know. So I'm going to bring this to a close. I'll put the recording up. And by the way, I've got other recordings to do. Nick suggested something during the week, which I thought was very valuable. And I'm going to do a video later on today about how to find your way around the website, the membership site, and the connection site, and the things that you can do. And I know Nick's emailed me. I think Anne-Marie was due to be on this call. She was keen to be on, but her husband has had a minor motorbike accident. So I hope that's all right.
I think she'll be with us next week, Paul. So just delayed by a week.
That's great. Ewen, you were looking to do something again, but not just what you want to do. What, you know, has everybody found? Well, actually, if I can go around and just say one thing you've got from today's meeting, and is there anything else you'd like Ewen to go further on? Because if you think you've got it all handled now, then Ewen could take some weeks off. But is there anything you'd like to do on another occasion? I don't mean next week, maybe in a fortnight's time or whatever. So let me start with Rod. One thing you've got from today's meeting.
Yeah, at least it sort of demystifies it, doesn't it? It's a bit like Mystic Bloody Meg, isn't it? Where's the crystal ball, and how do we, and give her £5, she'll tell you how wonderful you are. Give her £10, she'll tell you you're going to be the president next week. It seems a little bit like that, but I think it's like anything else. You've got to be consistent. You've got to keep analysing what you're doing, and as Ewan said, I mean, it's just trial and error, a lot of it.
What it basically said is if this is not something you do but need to do, maybe you find somebody that will do it, but at least you've got some idea as to the questions you would ask. And Marcus.
Yeah, I really was taken by the fact that you don't think it matters about being on page one with your advert. I'm so page one obsessed. That is quite interesting for you, and so that's what I'm taking away. And on the same theme, maybe my website does split in between page one and page two for personal branding photography Bristol. And I just want, and it's pretty basic things, but I'd like to know a bit more about how I can stay on page one and why I keep fluctuating between the two.
Well, from what you were saying, I would want to know if you've got that advert running for male branding photography that you've run for 6 months and not got any business from it. I'd want to know what to tweak to get that business. That's what I'd be wanting to do. Yes,
well, that could be a case, Paul. I think people are clicking on it. I just go back to the fact that I don't think there is a business there at the moment in it.
Well,
that's the reason why. For me, it's a lost leader. I'm looking at it is that it's building my authority. And that's the price I'm paying for doing that on that advert, really.
Well, of course, that raises a point. If somebody clicks on it but don't do anything else, you've got to say, well, is what they're clicking on compelling enough to get them to do anything else?
Well, that is yeah, that's a good point. But thank you. Yes.
Maybe a video interview could be the answer. We test that, which we're going to think about. Mel.
Yeah, I think following what Ewan's talked about, I'm going to go on a Google, Microsoft digital marketing fact-finding journey and see what is appropriate and what I can do. And then if I've got any questions, I'll come back to Ewan with those. That's
great. That's good. Manny, all a bit bewildering, but...
Yeah. No, what I got out of this is you said get deep, because I'm creating 2 landing pages for my business, and get as much information. Don't keep it simple, because if they're that serious, they'll put it in, and give you the details, and they'll contact you. And what I'm getting out of this was tell everybody to talk about you, how good you are, and the courses you were saying about finding courses on any product or any skills. When I was looking for funeral, how to become a funeral director or anything, there's not many courses out there. And that's a market that someone needs to take up, and to try to create courses. Even if it's basic, get going on that one. And the other thing, Ewan, I can't get out of my head. You know, your little saying, will it make the boat go faster? Makes sense. Get rid of the rest of the crap.
Andrew.
Yeah, it will make both go faster. Yeah, brilliant. I've never done paid for clicks, so I'm always fascinated when Ewan sort of does these sort of show and tells. And yeah, that was really, really good. So thank you very much, Ewan. Absolutely fantastic. So yeah, I'm sort of now thinking, well, if I get some time, then I might be looking to run one. So go.
Well, I think one thing I'd love. I've actually mentioned this to you, and it certainly wasn't for today. But I think, well, if I was to say take £20 and was it £25 and then £20 off Bing, that could create over £200 worth of advertising, how would I spend it? What would I, just for the sheer, I think I spent £20 in Las Vegas, so I'd spend £20. What could I learn from that? And how would I go about it? That would be an interesting one. Martin, you were asking a few questions. I don't know whether that's because you've done pay-per-click, or you're thinking of doing that, or just wanted to know more. What have you got from today?
Yeah, basically, sort of Google AdWords were a bit mysterious to me, and I wasn't, it was something I wasn't really interested in, or I've never done. So it's really, or it was something I thought somebody else would do, not myself. But it sort of thought it was interesting as, for an individual, that it's something that you could do and can work. Just, you made it really clear. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Nick?
Thanks very much, Ewan. I think that was really useful. I'm kind of semi-educated and semi-bamboozled still. I've always focused on organic search, and I've managed to get myself to #1 page in quite a lot of my target sectors within my core geographical region. So I'm pleased I've done that, but I still feel there's huge potential with Google AdWords. But I think what your presentation showed me is that I need to talk to a professional if I do it. If I try and do it on my own, I will just waste my life testing and learning. And I think I did this with Facebook advertising. I spent so much time fanning around, and I didn't really feel like I learned anything. And I think there are some things where you do just need to use a professional. And Marcus, I know you've obviously been quite successful doing it yourself, and hats off to you. But
Google will contact you, and they'll give you an advisor that'll spend about a year with you going over it. They do go through it with you, and they are very good. But Ewan is right; they will try and make you spend money, obviously. Yeah. But if you get the right advisor, it makes a lot of difference. And I had a really good one.
Yeah, and maybe that was a lucky break for you, Marcus.
No, I think that's interesting. That's something quite new. Because we had one come to us, and he came to us and said, "I can't really advise you anything." And I said, "No, you can't, because I've been doing this longer than you have." But in a nice way. But it is a new thing, and I think what Google have realised is they've realised that it is a bit of smoke and mirrors, and actually, I've heard good things, and it's interesting that I've heard good things about what they do. So maybe, Nick, maybe it's just, once you start, you will get assigned an account manager who will speak to you and they will help you. And maybe that's the way to go, because from my point, from someone who's spent their time doing this, it's quite difficult to make it work, because you obviously have a set budget. And when you start to kick in my time, it makes it really difficult. And I don't want to spend money for yours that you don't want to have to spend. So doing it that way could be interesting just to try it, and if you spend your £25 and get you 75 quid, then why not?
And Google are throwing vouchers at me left, right, and centre. I think one comes in every couple of months for 250 quid. So I think there's an opportunity there to test and learn, but it's doing it in the right way.
I mean, what I could do quite simply is I could put down a checklist, a checklist of key things to do and not to do, which would help kind of kick you off, because they would be the things that the bits that people would usually fall over, just for you to have in your mind. If you did think about it, if anyone thought about it, it'd be a very, just a very simple checklist of things to remember to do and not to do.
That would be incredibly useful to you. And I think a toolkit to know how to actually engage with Google when it comes to Google AdWords would be really useful.
What could be useful is you provide the checklist. If somebody is thinking, right, well, I don't mind investing in this, then they create what they're going to do, and we put it on here and we analyze it and all learn from it. That could be.
No, that's easy. We could do that in one session, because that would be easy for me to do, to go in and have a look and make suggestions.
So I'll put that out after the meet. I know Rebecca's got she's gone into hiding again, and but I don't know whether she's able to croak something out as to what
I will. I'll make an announcement now. No, that's. I'm so glad that I have tuned in. That's been really, really useful, Ewen. So thanks for that. And I think it does, because I've been thinking about paid ads, or maybe email campaign as well, which I'd be interested for us to do maybe a session on email campaigns. But it's also what you said, Ewen, about getting the experience right. So once they've come off the ad and onto your landing page, that's got to be just right. So that's sort of where my focus is at the moment, getting my portfolio better, and thinking that you mentioned about a single-minded purpose. I thought that was really useful to think about, that I need to know what I want them to do and why and all the rest of it. So yeah, really useful.
Rebecca, you actually talking about email. I've produced a list. I haven't published it yet, as to the possible subjects under each of the categories, the 5 categories. If I put that out as a survey, and you just tick what you'd be particularly interested in, one of them is in fact email marketing, because that's an area that I find very valuable.
Yeah, that would be great.
Now, there's one thing that I want to say before we finish, and I'm sorry it's slightly over time. Chris, as you know, has been, he's about to do this presentation. He's messaged me this morning to say that they already have 420 people booked on this session he's doing at 6 o'clock on Thursday. I'm going to promote it on LinkedIn. I'm going to promote it to you guys. I think we should all support Chris. Grab a place, just see how he does. Not only is it a way of learning more about Chris, his subject is about managing pain, which is something we all go through from time to time. And if you can't make that particular session, at least we can promote it. So if you see it on LinkedIn and elsewhere, not only like, but comment on it and share it. I think that would be great support for Chris.
I think just about I think if you can't make the actual session, Chris said that it is available any time after that.
The app shows all sorts of health-related videos and recordings. So anybody that's interested in that could be well worthwhile. So well done, Chris. Thanks very much indeed for everybody. Sorry, Ewen.
Just one last thing. You'll all be pleased to hear, or not pleased to hear, I only got through about a third of my presentation, so I've still got social media and some other things to do, which I'll do on another session if everyone would like me to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, Ewen. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great week.